Almost 9 years after General Motors left Janesville, a new book tells the story of the plant's closing, the effect on that close-knit community, and the people who live there. The book is called Janesville, An American Story. Author Amy Goldstein is a Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporter who spent years in Janesville talking to the people there and looking at GM's aftermath. Last week, I talked with her about the impact of the plant closing on the community and how the people of Janesville responded. Let's talk about Janesville, An American Story. Amy, why did you think this story, the Janesville story, needed to be told?
Well, if you think about the years after the big recession that officially ended in 2009, the economy still was not very good, and people knew that the unemployment rate was high. And people knew that there was fighting going on politically about whether the country's economic policies were helping or not helping. But I had the sense that there wasn't enough talk about what it really is like to lose work. And that was a close-up that I thought was worth taking.
So let's talk about what happened to Janesville when the plant closed. The last Tahoe rolls off the assembly line 2 days before Christmas back in 2008. What happened to the community? Because you hear about the job losses at GM, but there's this ripple effect, this domino effect that really affects the community in a big way.
So that's exactly right. I mean, I think of it as a cascade. So because the assembly plant existed, and in its heyday, the assembly plant had about 7,100 jobs. It was down to about 3,000 the last two shifts that went away in 2008. But because those jobs existed, there were lots of supplier companies right in Janesville or in the area, and those jobs went away because you didn't need to manufacture seats anymore for an assembly plant that wasn't producing SUVs. And because those jobs went away at suppliers, it was hard for some of the small businesses to keep going because there weren't as many customers to come in and buy merchandise or go out to eat. So as you say, there was this ripple effect over a couple of years that was really hard on this community.
One of the things that I think is an important part of this book is a study that you did of the people who lost their jobs because of the plant closure in Janesville. The conventional wisdom is that when there's a plant closing, the laid-off workers, many of whom will go to a technical college or whatever and learn a new profession, learn a new career, and that will be the next phase of their lives. What did you find? What happened to the people who lost their jobs, and many of whom who did go back for retraining?
Well, about 2,000 people in and around Janesville went to Black Hawk Technical College, which is right in Janesville, in the couple years after all this work vanished. And I think the college did a really admirable job. I mean, I didn't know anything about it when I started looking at it, but I came to think that people at this college really tried. I mean, they understood that, imagine being a factory worker in your 30s or your 40s, haven't been to school for half your lifetime. You might not have liked school, which is why you went into factory work in the first place. You don't know where your income's going to come from next. You don't know if your family's going to have enough to eat for dinner. And now you're expected to study. I mean, that's a pretty hard thing. So the college did all kinds of things to try to be hospitable to these returning factory workers becoming students. They started computer boot camps once they realized that not everybody was very good at using computer. They created study still courses. So they really knocked themselves out at this college. But all that said, when we looked at it statistically, trying to compare people who had been laid off and either did go back to school or didn't, it was quite surprising. It turned out that the people who went back to school a few years after this were less likely to be working all 4 seasons of the year, and they had a bigger pay drop from before the recession to a few years afterwards.
And do we know why that is?
There are all kinds of theories as to why. I mean, kind of a basic fact on the ground is that there just weren't that many jobs. And the college really tried to coordinate with people in the business community, try to figure out where jobs in the still bad economy place might lie, tried to encourage people to study in those fields, but there weren't always jobs.
Amy, you were just down in Janesville not too long ago. The new reality, and I'm sure business leaders down there would say, we've bounced back. Look at our unemployment rate. One time it was 13.5, now it's around 4. We have some new businesses that have come here, a new distribution center. So there are good things happening here. But is there another part of the story that doesn't get as much attention as the unemployment rate, for instance?
Well, I think how things look in Janesville depends on where in Janesville you sit. And there are some businesses that have come in. I mean, this is a very resilient community, I came to learn. I mean, it's the antithesis of a kind of place that when all this work went away, just gave up. I mean, there have been very strong economic development efforts going on ever since this work went away, and it's still going on. But that doesn't mean that everybody is doing well. And if you look at the kind of jobs people have, the pay is nothing like the $28 an hour that were the UAW GM wages when the plant closed in 2008. And, you know, I know a social studies teacher in town who's one of the people in the book, and she's always told me that it was actually very hard for the few years after this work went away for high school kids to get part-time jobs because the kind of work that they would have wanted to do, their parents were now looking for.
Amy Goldstein is the author of Janesville, An American Story. She is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter for the Washington Post. Amy Goldstein, it's good to have you with us today. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You can see my entire interview with author Amy Goldstein on our website, WISN.com, where she's describing people known as the GM Gypsies, workers who've taken GM jobs hundreds of miles away and are commuting from Janesville. Coming up next on Upfront, we'll return to the hot-button issue of state roads, what transportation developers are saying about their condition, and the current debate over how to pay for them.